My talk is about introducing how paradigms are informed, how we talk about things that seem daunting to learn at first, such as machine learning or neural networks and natural language processing. Like when I say this out loud, these were things that I thought that I wouldn't be able to understand realistically within like 2 years of learning coding, or like even 4 years. But I found that the discussions surrounding these terms are lacking a perspective from like the humanities and of course like interdisciplinary views for kind of complicating the discussions around them. So one thing that I kind of wanted to look at in particular is the term sentiment analysis. Sentiment analysis is interesting to me because it's kind of the science around quantifying things like emotions, quantifying desires or anticipations, which on paper seemed really, really difficult to do. Even thinking of condensing something as complex as that, part of it seems like a really interesting design challenge. It's enticing on one hand, and on the other hand, it seems insurmountable in a way. In conversations where you're getting relevant feedback, where you feel empathized with, where you feel like the other person is present, that's not a conversation where you're actively thinking about the quantification of those elements of the conversation, right? But if you think about this as a design question, as opinion mining, as something where we're trying to predict the emotional responses we get from certain types of words to solicit responses in that way, we begin to work into something that is closer to psychology called appraisal theory. And so already like the lines are blurring between those two concepts, something that's very core to natural language processing. So this is a really interesting example of how natural language processing manifests in the real world. X2 AI is a company, I believe, opened in 2016. Their flagship product was TESS. This is an image from their public tech demo, which you can find on Vimeo. TESS was developed to be a kind of on-the-fly psychoanalyst. She delivers cognitive behavioral therapy for you like on your cell phone or you know, through whatever like way you want to get it. Like I think there was also like a flavor of TESS that ran on Facebook, which is really problematic because Facebook owns all your data. So like any like legal kind of protections that you would have if you were seeing a licensed psychotherapist privately, obviously that doesn't fly. Like if you're using it on Facebook, there is no privacy there, which is really interesting. And something else, you know, while I was researching TESS and how natural language processing is used for her kind of natural flow of conversation, I found that TESS was being used to treat Syrian refugees. Part of the reason why X2 AI began to monetize this this product is, according to them, they were closing the gap between a lack of like licensed psychotherapists for Syrian refugees, the fact that they didn't have access to healthcare in a lot of cases, and while they are, you know, decidedly doing that and providing that, it's coming at the cost of humanity and feeling like you're being witnessed, which is a huge part of psychotherapy, in my opinion. This is actually a comment that comes from Woebot, which is very similar to TESS, in that it's a chatbot that delivers cognitive behavioral therapy to its clients, usually via mobile. And okay, one of the comments is, I hated using emojis to describe how I feel. This is kind of shorthand for explaining why these interactions might be frustrating for people who are actually looking for psychological help. If you're not being seen, if you're not having an interaction that feels personal, And obviously, like, you don't want to shorthand your emotions into something that becomes like a caricature of yourself. I mean, we know why this is problematic or why it could be difficult for some people to adopt chatbots in that way. If we want to realistically bridge this mental health care gap with chatbots, I think we have to reevaluate how we're using CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy. It's not a panacea. Part of the reason why it fits so perfectly into natural language processing is because it's so formulaic. I was talking to someone about this, and they said that it's kind of like owning yourself with facts. Like, it's very, like, you have a very rigid kind of set of like rules or ways of thinking of your own mentality. It's very structured. And so this translates perfectly for code. You just give it like certain keywords, like you train it to search for words like, I'm not feeling good or bad, or like looking for question marks, things that are totally ripped out of context of an actual conversation of how you're feeling. And in a way, it parrots back to you those sentiments, and then will like send you to a link to like a video for like a 5-minute like self-care thing where you just like breathe for 5 minutes. So it seems it can be effective, but qualitatively it's probably not the best thing. Okay, now I'm trying to moving a little bit more into actual machine learning proper. These are 3 images which are pretty jarring to look at. The first one has a caption that says, "A woman riding a horse on a dirt road." Second one, an airplane is parked on the tarmac in an airport. Third, a group of people standing on top of a beach. I mean, obviously, these are all lacking social context, like historical awareness. What they're lacking is empathy, right? But if we're seeing like the strict facts of it, it's not necessarily wrong. It is hitting all of the landmarks that it's supposed to be seeing, right? It is seeing a woman riding a horse. It is seeing an airplane in tarmac, and it is seeing a group of people on a beach. This is kind of, I mean, of course, like, this model isn't like the best model to be showing. I'm sure there's ones that are more accurate for the images that they're looking for, but this is just an extreme example of how, words don't really like link up with what we think machines are seeing, or like the narratives that we like to say about machine intelligence, right? It's not always as straightforward as like, yes, it identifies what it sees, it knows what it means. Oh my goodness, okay, sorry. I have a lot more content, but we're gonna mash it down into 1 minute. I wanted to kind of like look away from machine learning and look toward the way that biases are replicated through natural language processing. We're using like a huge corpus of text. So for example, if you're doing a machine learning model where you want it to comb common web pages, or you're using something that only looks at Google News, things like Word2Vec and Glove do this. They're just a mirror for us. Any bias that people have already in those articles, which is plenty, they're just going to shoot it right back at us. It's not making an objective reading of anything, really, unless you artificially weight it to do that. And it won't do that by itself unless like you literally artificially go in and change it. It won't just work that way automatically. These are just examples of extreme gender stereotypes, where the gender isn't orthographic to the language, meaning it's not mechanically built in, such as words like sister or brother. These are ones where gender is implied, but of course, like, the gender shouldn't really mean anything. This is another example of it, very mechanical. Ones where gender would be appropriate would be like sister, brother, mother, father, or something, but when it starts making analogies between things that are like thought of to be feminine versus masculine, you see like none of those things should really have any gendered color to them, but they end up doing that anyway. Oh man, so just in the next 30 seconds, I'm not gonna go through how this works. But I'm in the radical pedagogy track because I believe, similar to the other talks before me, that in order to like make any real lasting changes on these biases for systems that we believe to be objective just because they're machines, but they're not, sometimes we do have to like artificially re-weight them, meaning directing them in ways to like literally rip out the gender that it's seeing. Or if not doing that, you know, putting in like artificial like stopgaps so that it's able to make, you know, opinions for itself that maybe reflect a better politic or something. Anyway, thank you.